I don't know if this is a Baptist thing. I don't know if it's, or if it's, I think it's probably like an evangelical thing. Like when there's an invitation, they're supposed to bow their heads. So it's a private moment. Nobody feels like they're putting on blast or on display. They invite you to pray. Now, if you did choose, I hate this language so much, man. If you did choose to accept Jesus Christ in your heart as Lord and Savior, I hate saying that. They tell you to like raise your hand, and you raise your hand. It's like, okay, now come forward. Then you fill out the card, and for whatever reason, all that moment about everybody bow your head so you can't see is just thrown away, because now you have to stand in front of the church, and everybody's supposed to come up and hug you, shake your hand, say, "Congratulations, brother." And it's like, what happened to the privacy thing? And like, this is so inconsistent. This is an emotional roller coaster. And I was not prepared for anything.
That's hilarious. Yeah. Welcome to City Square Podcast, where we talk with everyday people about faith and work. My name is Micah. My guest this episode is Jon Herrera. He is an entrepreneur from San Antonio, Texas. He enjoys all things to do with grilling and smoking, and keeps busy serving his and other churches. How's it going, Jon?
Doing good, man. How are you?
Man, I'm well. Thanks for doing this.
Always, man.
So, we'll get right down to it. Where'd you grow up?
Yeah, man. So I grew up in basically the Austin, Texas metropolitan area. And just me, my brother, and my mom and dad. And I was basically, yeah, man, I was there my whole life. Born in El Paso, but I was basically grew up in the Austin metropolitan area.
Gotcha. Did you actually enjoy living there?
Yeah, man, it was all right. I mean, I didn't have anything to compare it to, so I didn't really know what humidity was, so I just kind of always assumed every day was hot.
It's Texas for you. It's either hot and humid or just hot. Terrible.
It's always hot.
Did you attend church anywhere growing up?
Not really. I have very, very blurry memories. I think I went to what would have probably been the equivalent of like maybe a VBS when I was a little kid. But other than that, a guy I went to school with in junior high that I didn't hang out with at all invited me to, I think it was a youth group. And I never understood why he invited me. But as I've gotten into ministry later in life, I think he had to like invite 10 friends or something, 10 friends or something. And like, I just kind of like lived in his neighborhood. So he invited me.
He probably got a prize for inviting you.
Yeah. He probably like prize or a raffle or something like that. Sure.
What kind of church was that? Do you remember?
It was some kind of a Baptist church.
Well, it's Texas, so that's a pretty good guess.
Yeah. It's probably SBC or something like that.
Yeah. So no real church background. No, you didn't really have much of a exposure to Christianity anyway.
No, my both of my parents had a church background, but it really wasn't something that we didn't go to church every Sunday or anything really like that. My mom had some kind of a Baptist background, and my dad had some kind of a Catholic background.
Okay. So they got married and just decided they didn't need it anymore or something like that?
Yeah, something like that. We didn't really talk a lot about it, honestly. But I was taught a few things. And so I was taught that the only real Bible was the King James Bible, even though I didn't really read it. And I was, well, I guess kind of like that was really it. I think I knew like the major stories like Noah and the Ark and the feeding of the 5,000 with the fish and the loaves. That was just stuff like that.
Gotcha. What did you want to be when you grow up?
So when I was growing up, I was pretty dead set on being a veterinarian when I was growing up. I always liked dogs and animals and that kind of thing. And I thought that I wanted to have a vet. I wanted to be a vet. I would have my own practice, my own building, on my own plot of land. And I was gonna do that. I was gonna go to A&M, work all that kind of stuff out, and it was just gonna happen. But after I kept making like C's in all my science classes. I was like, I got to figure something else out. And so like, I had like a 71 average in biology or something. And it wasn't even like advanced biology. It was just like generic biology where all your tests were open book and open notes and that kind of thing. And like, I was making 70, 71, 72s on everything.
Oof.
And so I was like, I got to figure something else out. I was like, I did some research. I'm like, well, I got to take anatomy. I got to take, I don't know, physiology or all this other kind of stuff. I hated science, man. I also hated school. And so like, to be a vet, you got to take, I think sometimes more science and schooling than some doctors do, from what I've always told. I'm like, this sucks. I ain't doing this. Wow. And so I found other interests.
You were public schooled all the way up from like grade school?
Always.
So for like elementary, middle school, high school, what kind of kid were you? Were you like a jock, a nerd? You know, clearly you were academically gifted in science. So
yeah, right. I wasn't a jock. I wasn't a nerd. We called them bangers. We didn't call them like, well, I guess, do we call them goth? I don't think we called them goth back then. We might have called them emo. I don't remember. I wasn't any of that, man. I was just a dude. I was just a guy. I was an average Joe. I was average, man. Wasn't loud or obnoxious. Wasn't center of attention. Wasn't popular. Wasn't a nerd. Wasn't a band geek. I played some sports, but I sucked at it. And so I wasn't really a jock. I was literally just there, man. I hated school. I wasn't picked on. I just hated being there. I hated being there so much. I actually graduated high school a year early. And so, I mean, I wasted that year because I spent that extra year in college getting my undergraduate. And so, yeah, man, I was just a dude.
You hated school so much that you decided to go to college.
Well, yeah, because you have to.
Naturally.
I don't think that's what we're talking about today. But yeah, man, you have to go to college. Otherwise, you can't make it. You're a loser if you go to college.
So what did you actually study in college?
So the last couple of I guess my high school youth years, I started getting into computers and started getting into like to coding and designing websites and a lot of that kind of stuff. And so when I went to college, like I had two goals. And at this point, I started getting really curious about religion, started getting really curious about spirituality. And like, I had a whole lot of questions, but I didn't really know what to do with them. And I went to college with two things in mind. I'm going to go get a degree in computer science because I'm into that right now. And I'm going to figure out who or what this God thing is. And that's what I was going to do.
So those, I'll circle back on the computer science thing.
Yeah.
So it was in high school, you started like trying to figure out like the big questions or, you know, the whys in the universe, that sort of thing.
Yeah. I think maybe I had a couple of friends who like enjoyed talking about like that kind of stuff. And so like we always talked about the hot button issues and then the big questions like, how do we get here? Why are we here? Is there a God or is there gods? Who or what is that? And that kind of thing.
Did they have any like satisfactory answers or?
Man, I hate thinking about how long ago that was.
Too long.
Because none of us were actually like academically awesome people. None of us were people who actually went to church. We were just people, I think, who enjoyed having conversation. We found people that we could talk about that kind of stuff with. And we were in high school and we were teenagers. So like we all thought we were right. We all thought we knew it all. We would hash it out in the hallways, or maybe we would go and hang out because IHOP back then was still open 24 hours. And we'd go to IHOP in the middle of the night and we would just talk about everything.
No curfews for you then?
No curfews, man. No curfews.
That's awesome. Wouldn't be awesome for young Micah, but so moving back a bit, was your household pretty strict or was it pretty lax? You said no curfews. Was there anything else that was relaxed in it?
I mean, even though like I didn't grow up like in the church, like I myself would probably consider myself a somewhat kind of like a moralistic person. Like it was important to people that I was viewed as a good person. It was important to me. It was important to me that people viewed me as a good person. It was important to me that I was a trusted person. It was important that people thought that I was a good moral person. And so for the most part is really key. I was not somebody who acted out a lot. And so like if I wanted to go to IHOP with my friends at 1 a.m., I told my parents I want to go to IHOP. I'm going to go to IHOP. And since I was a pretty well-behaved person by cultural standards, like they were cool with it.
Gotcha.
And so like I guess to answer your question, no, it wasn't a really, strict household for the most part. At least once we got in like high school and stuff, my parents were pretty chill.
So you were a good person, quote unquote. And it was important for you to be viewed like that, like, to have that public perception. Do you know if that came from your parents or was that something you just picked up from like teachers or peers or something?
It was, it might have been both. I never really put a whole lot of thought into that. But like, maybe it was probably both. It was probably a bunch of things. Like I remember when, cause I didn't drink alcohol in high school. I didn't smoke when I was in high school. I didn't smoke weed or cigarettes or that kind of stuff. I didn't do anything like that when I was in high school. And so I remember, I think when UT won the Rose Bowl back in 2005, I think that was one of the very few times I came back home. After they won the Rose Bowl, me and a few of my friends went to 6th Street in Austin. And, we were allowed one of my friends was allowed to go and take his vehicle because his dad knew that I was going to be there. And so like they went there with the intent probably to drink or something, even though they're underage and that kind of stuff. And his dad was fine with his kids drinking, but he was also, but partially because he knew I was going to be there. And so like I thrived off of that. Like I ate that stuff up, like not in a good way.
So you were the responsible one in the friend group?
Yeah. And like I was just a self-righteous person, man.
So no real church background, academically average, decided to go to college. What made you pick the college you picked?
It was kind of picked for me. So in college, even though I hated high school, I was wanting to go to college, partially because you're told you have to, but I wanted to go because I wanted to like make something of myself and that kind of thing. And I had joined this organization in high school that was supposed to help prepare you to go to college. They're supposed to like help you find the best one for you, the right one, and help you learn how to like fill out the applications and that kind of stuff. And I was a part of that, but I wasn't like, once again, wasn't like the most responsible. I wasn't the most responsible person. And so I graduated high school without college. And so, which in theory, you think that says more about the organization, but I don't think that's really fair because after I graduated high school, the woman who's in charge of the organization, she called me up. She's like, "Hey, John, what are you doing this summer?" I'm like, not much. Just hanging out, trying to figure out what's next. Might take some classes at ACC, Austin Community College. And she told me she was taking a group of students out to a university out in West Texas called Sul State. And I wanted to know if I wanted to go. Everything was free, except for like the ride there was free, the gas was free, the lodging was free, the food while we were there was free. I just need to bring spending money for the road on the way there and back. And so I was like, yeah, I'm interested. Let me check with my parents. And they were cool with it. And so I went out to West Texas to Sil Ross. We did a tour, stayed in the dorms, all that kind of fun stuff. And the woman took me to the registrar's office and said, what can we do to get this guy enrolled? And so we started the enrollment process like right then, like the application process right then and there.
Just like standing there like I'm going to go to college.
Nobody asked me what I wanted. And
awesome.
So I went back home, told my parents that I applied to Sil Ross State, and I got my acceptance letter in the mail. This was like in June or July, like might have been in July. Got my acceptance letter the next couple of weeks, and then like a month later, I was going to college someplace I had no intent of going. I wasn't part of my plans, wasn't part of my parents' plans. They didn't really have any time to emotionally prepare for their kid going 400 or 500 miles away from home. So, and yeah, man.
Now, are you the oldest or the youngest?
Yeah, I'm the oldest.
Oldest.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. So you were the first one to fly the coop, and you only gave him like a couple months.
I don't even know if it was a couple months, man. It might have just been a month.
Wow.
Yeah. But that was kind of how for the longest time, I made most of my decisions. I did them just kind of like on the spur of the moment. It's only been probably in the past couple of years that I've probably stopped doing that.
Gotcha.
I mean, I think you probably know that. But yeah.
Interesting. So it was at Sil Ross then that you were first introduced to Christianity?
Yeah. So I went there, had a short list of things to do, get my degree in computer science, which I didn't do. And
wait, you didn't do?
Yeah, I didn't I went there to get a degree in computer science and didn't. I got a degree in communication. And
all right.
I also wanted to figure out the God thing. And so, like I said, my mom had a Baptist background. And even though my dad had a Catholic background, I don't think I mentioned this earlier, but I was taught that Catholic is bad. And so I saw a flyer and put it up in my dorm for a Baptist student group. And so I was like, oh, that's safe. So I'll go to check out the Baptist student group. It's called Baptist Student Ministry. And I went to one of their meetings once, and it was interesting. Everybody was nice. Everybody really was nice. I met a small group of guys that were nice and welcoming, hung out with them for that semester. And that's kind of how it kind of started. And like I was really, like I tell a lot of people, like I was genuinely afraid of joining a cult. Because I didn't know anything about anything then. Like all I knew was my mom had a Baptist background, so Baptists must be safe. I'll go to this. I really don't want to join a cult because I think I had enough self-awareness to know that I probably wouldn't know if I was. And so, yeah, man, started hanging out with some of the students from that. And that semester is when I would say that I was saved. There was a worship night that semester, and I kind of basically responded to an invitation, which is kind of funny because I'm not really a fan of those today. And that's kind of like I said, that's kind of when it started.
Gotcha. Yeah. So it sounds similar to how I grew up. The invitation, just as I am, plays, or Jesus paid it all, or something like that. And you bow your heads and close your eyes, and no one looking around. And then the pastor or preacher or whoever, throws out some different questions and asks people to raise their hand or come forward or whatever. Yeah.
It's kind of funny you say that because I remember that pastor, like he was a nice guy. He was a good dude. And they kind of tell you, like, I don't know if this is a Baptist thing. I don't know if I think it's probably like an evangelical thing. Like when there's an invitation, they're supposed to bow their heads. So it's a private moment. Nobody feels like they're putting on blast or on display. They invite you to pray. Now, if you did choose, I hate this language so much, man. If you did choose to accept Jesus Christ in your heart as Lord and Savior, I hate saying that. They tell you to like raise your hand, and you raise your hand. It's like, okay, now come forward. Then you fill out the card. And for whatever reason, all that moment about everybody bow your head so you can't see is just thrown away, because now you have to stand in front of the church and everybody's supposed to come up and hug you, shake your hand, say, congratulations, brother. And it's like, what happened to the privacy thing? And like, this is so inconsistent. This is an emotional roller coaster. And I was not prepared for anything.
That's hilarious. Yeah. That brings back some memories for sure. Okay. Fascinating. So, and like I'd say, both you and I are in different places than where we started from.
Yeah.
And that whole choose Jesus is certainly not language we might use now, but, God draws straight lines with crooked sticks from all over the place, regardless of denomination. So
absolutely.
That's funny. Brings back memories. So you started off in a Baptist student mission. Did you get connected with a church in near St. Ross, or?
That's so much more of an interesting question than it probably should be. Not really, but kind of.
Okay.
Because it was I love my time in college. Like, I hated being in school growing up, but like, I loved being in college. And I understand like why it's appealing for people to try to stay there. And so I'm basically God saved me my freshman year in college, and people are really excited that day. Like, nothing really kind of happened. There was one woman who did hand me a Bible in that time, and she gave me some CDs of music to listen to, which was also kind of trippy because like it was a lot of like CCM. And
best music ever.
Well, at that moment, it kind of was, because pinnacle, I thought that anything and everything that was I guess deemed Christian had to have been like with a hymn book and an organ. And I thought that all Christians believed that anything outside of that was the devil's music. And so like that was what I thought. Yeah, but like I remember like I hadn't grown up in church, but that's what I thought. And so like when she handed me things like, I don't know, man, like Newsboys, Casting Crowns, Toby Mac was probably the trippiest, because Toby Mac was probably what sounded closest to probably what I listened to at that moment. And things like that was weird, because like they were normal looking people and they had instruments. Their music sounded kind of normal. They wore jeans and t-shirts and like that kind of stuff. And their music just sounded kind of normal. And so like that was kind of weird. Cutlass was a big thing when I was in college. I don't know if it still is, but like, so yeah, that was kind of like, a lot of that stuff I make fun of today, but like in that moment, it was kind of like it was a big deal. And, that lady gave me a car like a couple years later too. She was one of those people where, and man, like I don't actually realize how generous and nice and good she was to me until after I kind of like grew up, and like I kind of reflect back on those days, and it's interesting. But so anyways, man, with that being said, to actually answer the question, I wouldn't say I got plugged into a church, but like I wanted to go to church. And so the director of the BSM would drive me to the First Baptist Church for a couple of years, and we would go to like a Bible study, and then to church, and then to like out to lunch afterwards. And that was kind of like how it kind of went. And I'm trying to remember this. About a year later, I kind of got closer. The people I was building relationships with, we would go to church like almost every week. And cause like I really, for whatever reason, I don't, other than like, obviously like it was a God thing, but I'm trying really hard not to like ramble through this because I reflect back on this and I still ask questions about a lot of things. But I mean, like I would go to, there was a Methodist student group on campus, and I would go to their thing like on Tuesday afternoon. And I would go to the BSM thing on Tuesday nights. And I would go to another church on Wednesday nights. And I would go to like another student thing on Thursday. And then I'd go to a worship night on Friday nights. And then I would like hit up the Bible study and worship and everything on Sunday afternoon, and then maybe go on to another church on Sunday nights. And so like I was hungry for for as much as I could actually get. I wanted to be around as much like God's people, the church, worship, teaching of the Bible. And I wanted to experience all of that in as much as I possibly could. And so I don't think I was actually a member at any of those churches. And then like the more you get involved with the church, the more you realize kind of what the church is. And you start to like see a lot of like just the brokenness in the structure, the way the black church is structured. You see like just a lot of like the petty, stupid things that unfortunately there's people know about. And the more I study, the more I kind of start to find discipleship from one of the pastors. I start to realize like things are really not as they should be. And I start to see that. And I'm like, I don't want to be around that. I want to be around somewhere where I can actually get involved in something that's actually making a difference. I can get involved in someplace where people are actually being saved, people are actually being discipled. And so the church I was going to on Sunday for about 2 years in a small rural town, like there might have been 40 to 50 people there every Sunday. After about 2 years of the ushers or deacons or whoever it was that's standing by the door asking me, "Is this your first time here, young man?" I kind of started to get bitter about it. So I'm like, this is a small church, man. This is a rural town. Like I've been coming here for 2 years, and for a college student, I was there for like almost every Sunday. I was there for at least 40, 45 Sundays out of the year. And I'm still getting asked, "Is this your first time here?" And I kind of started to get ticked off at that. And so then I go and hang out at the Assemblies of God church for about a year or so. And that pastor there was kind of impactful for me for a little bit. And it was a really small church that I was trying to like rebuild and restructure. And so like I got to be really heavily involved. I was going to help them start like some ministries, and I was a part of like the Sunday service and all these other kind of things. The pastor there was really passionate about evangelism and reaching the youth and that kind of stuff. So I was really excited about that. He probably should have been a pastor, but his passion was kind of like contagious. And I still did learn some stuff. And so he left town and got me, basically directed me back to the church I left. And they had a new associate pastor there who basically took me under his wing and spent a whole lot of time with me, taught me theology, bought me Bibles, study Bibles, and taught me about ministry and church planting and missions and all this kind of stuff. And he hung out with us, me and a group of college students at the diner till like 2 or 3 o'clock, talking about like theology, the things of God and culture and all that kind of stuff. I'd go to his house and watch Monday Night Football. And while we're watching football, we would still talk about Jesus and the gospel. And he would invite me over for dinner with his family. And he taught me about church planning and all this other kind of stuff, and taught me about Reformed theology, gave me books. And like, that was kind of when, even though I never really kind of got really heavily involved in that church, one of the pastors from that church poured into me a lot. And that was kind of a big deal.
Yeah. Interesting. They had to kind of like go away and come back for that to happen.
Yeah.
So did those deacons just not like recognize you, or they just didn't care? Or
I just, I don't know, man. I just think, I just guess maybe it's kind of like we're going through the motions. Maybe they needed somebody to do it and they didn't really want to. I mean, it's kind of normal for that place, even to this day. That, I mean, granted, there's bigger problems at that church, but I mean, that place is kind of a mess.
Genuinely fascinating. That's fascinating. Yeah. So you spent most of your time then in kind of Baptist or Pentecostal or Methodist. Yeah. So how do you get from there to Reformed?
Right, man. Because I mean, Reformed theology in that town, Reformed theology isn't really well thought of. I would probably say like what we call Arminianism is probably more dominance. Like dispensationalism out there is very, I don't know if thrives is the right word, but it's very popular.
I'm trying to think of something like a what's the word? An organism that is an invasive species. Do you really say something like that thrives?
It's a thriving virus.
Something like that. Spreads.
Man, can we say spread? I don't know. Spreads like COVID. I don't know. But like, so it's not really well thought about there. And I mean, when I was in college, because like I started learning about this, and I spent years learning about it when I was in college. I mean, I would read about theology instead of like do my homework when I was in college. And so, like I said, this pastor out there is giving me all these books, right? It's giving me stuff by R.C. Sproul. It's giving me like an ESV study Bible, and teaching me telling me like you should look up these different kind of pastors and listen to some of these kind of sermons. And like, have you ever heard of like Acts 29? You ever heard about Redeemer City to City and all these different kind of things? And so like, and what was weird is like I had been having questions about what was probably called Reformed theology beforehand, because I always struggled from like day one about how people would say God is in control, but like I'm in control of my salvation. Like those two things always confused me from day one. And I remember my freshman year asking people in a van on the way to like this student conference, I was like, how am I like in control of my salvation? How am I making this decision? And how is God in control? And somebody was disgusted, that I could even ask such a question. Like how like I could even be thinking about that kind of stuff. And so this pastor comes along and is encouraging me to ask these questions, and is encouraging me to learn these things, and is encouraging me to dive into the Bible and see what Scripture says about this kind of stuff. And so I've got anyways, man, so I've got all this material and I'm reading about it. And some of it like is easy for me to pick up more so than others, right? And like what people would call like limited atonement was one of the ones I probably like wrestled with like the most. And so like I'm in a culture where Reformed theology is not very well thought of. It's kind of hated. Well, there's one pastor out there that calls it heresy. Dispensationalism is very predominant out there. There we go. That's the word. And so like I basically come to the point where I'm like, yeah, like I definitely say like I'm reformed in my theology, at least in my soteriology, but it's a barrier out here. So I'm just not going to use that word. And so like at this point, like all these things that I identify with, all these ideologies I'm starting to identify with, I don't label myself that stuff because all of that's it's kind of puts barriers out there to label yourself those things. And so like I don't think it was probably about the time I graduated from college that I was like, yeah, I'm reformed. Actually, you know what? Yeah, like I am Baptist. And so it probably wasn't until I think I moved to Dallas for a couple of years, which where I felt more comfortable using those words.
Yeah. So what you were in the Baptist tradition then for most of your Christian life, I'd say.
I was in Baptist culture more than I probably was tradition.
Tomato.
Well, like, I don't really want to make this about splitting hairs, but like, I wasn't really like at a church that was like teaching on like the 1689 confession or any of that kind of stuff. And
I mean, that would be a very not niche in a small sense, but
yeah,
specific type of Baptist for sure.
Right. Yeah, I guess tradition. Yeah,
like denomination. I consider that because I came from a Baptist background as well, and it's a broadly traditional Southern Baptist-ish. You know, it's non-reformed, dispensational. You know, people might call it like easy believism or, you know, free grace or free will. You know, there's kind of the same big themes there. For people in Texas, it was a BGCT culture. I mean, the SBC wasn't really welcome out there either. BGCT is Baptist General Convention of Texas. And for people in tech ministry in Texas, they probably know what that means. But like, it's definitely Baptist General Convention of Texas culture, and SBC was not very wasn't too welcome out there. Gotcha. It's weird, man. It's very tribal. So the BGCT then they're not part of the SBC, But do they work with the SBC?
They're not a part of the SBC. All this stuff is so dumb, man. They're not a part of the SBC, but they work with North American Mission Board and International Mission Board.
Ah, okay.
But they're not a part of the SBC because they reject the Baptist BFM 2K, the Baptist Faith and Message 2000. They reject that.
Gotcha.
Dude,
that's a pretty broad confession, though. Would you say, so obviously there's a whole range there's a spectrum.
Yeah.
There's a spectrum of Southern Baptist churches.
Right.
But let's take the most typical example, how you kind of grew up or not grew up, but where, in college. Where do they fall on that kind of comparison to SBC? Are they more liberal, more conservative in some areas and others?
For the sake of conversation, they'd probably consider the moderates. They're the in-between between the SBC and the Cooperative Baptist Fellowship.
Okay.
They're the in-between of those.
Because the CBF, the Cooperative Baptist Fellowship, is liberal in at least certain ways, or more liberal, progressive.
Right.
Okay. Interesting. Fascinating. I knew there was I'm aware of the different organizations and the denominations that are not denominations, that are, that Baptists have a tendency to set up.
Convention.
Yeah. But that's interesting. I never really, I assumed that the BGCT was just the state thing, the state version, but I assumed they were cooperating with the SBC.
They cooperate with the SBC when it benefits them, but it doesn't benefit them. They're different.
I gotcha.
So when they want to send missions international, they work with the SBC through the International Mission Board. I think it's IMB.
Yeah, IMB or IM, whatever. The Internet Movie Database. So you went from Baptist, where, broadly speaking, where'd you find yourself now?
So, I mean, I've got to the point where I'm fine with saying that I'm Reformed and I'm Baptist. I agree with the Baptists on baptism. I'm a huge fan of the church autonomy and a lot of these things, those things that are big deals for Baptists. Mm-hmm. And so I've gotten to the point where I'm fine with using labels. A lot of people don't like to use a label if they don't 100% agree with it. And so you can line up with something 90%, but you're oh, I'm not that. You see, I a lot with politics and theology and that kind of thing and whatever. And so for all intents and purposes, I fit into the camp of Reformed Baptists.
Okay.
And I'm cool with that.
Yeah. So
if somebody is so hypersensitive about it that's a big deal, then I'm happy to chat it out. Or if they don't want to, then it's all good.
So you go to an actual Reformed Baptist church then? We're roughly speaking,
we're a Reformed church. It's not Baptist, but it is a Reformed church. And so it is a non-denominational church, but it's most definitely a Reformed church. And there are people there that would probably be theologically Baptists. There might be, they might catch themselves agreeing more with maybe Presbyterian theology. And there's some people there that are I really find it really intrigued by what Anglicanism is and that kind of thing. Or there's also people there who are just figuring out theology. And so they kind of got bored with the whole generic evangelicalism culture. And they're I really want to dig into the Word of God. I really want to dig into the scriptures. This liturgy stuff is kind of interesting. I'm my theology is reforming here. And so it's really cool.
Oh, you mentioned liturgy then. So your church is has a formal liturgy or?
Yeah. So, there's a formal liturgy. And that's something over the past few years that I had become more intrigued, curious, and more appreciative of over the years. And so when we moved to San Antonio about a year ago, we were fortunate enough to visit a liturgical church. And so it's pretty cool. A lot of, I know it rubs a lot of people the wrong way because it's structured. But I think as somebody who typically hates structure, I've actually found more of an appreciation for it. And it's like we read from the Old Testament every Sunday. We read from the Gospels every Sunday. We read from the epistles every Sunday. We read from the Psalms every Sunday. We read a creed every Sunday. We take part in communion together every Sunday with wine. And
it's the only way.
Like, I did not know until a few months ago that was invented in the 1800s.
Like grape juice?
In communion, yeah.
Yeah.
And it was a Methodist too, man.
Yeah, man.
Like they've been letting Baptists take the fall for that for way too long. And so like
birds of a feather drink grape juice together, I guess. Was it Luther who said something like, I'd rather drink blood with the papists than mere wine with the fanatics or something like that?
So that sounds like something Luther would say.
Yeah. I'm probably not getting the quote exactly correct. But yeah, he was basically, he had his strong views on communion. Interesting. So how did that even start? What drew you to liturgy in the first place? Like, that's not I have a lot of questions around your church and like where they're drawing their inspiration from and that sort of thing. But, cause it does sound like it's maybe in the more broad Reformed tradition, even if they are non-denominational. Cause like you don't see liturgy every church has a liturgy. It just depends. Every church has something they do every week or a structure they follow.
Every church has a liturgy, whether they want to admit it or not. That's
for sure. But when we say liturgy, that's a lot of people that brings to mind like a Roman Catholic service with like, incense and chanting and bells and priests in big robes and, so yeah, not a Reformed non-denominational church using a liturgy. Do you know if they get it from like where they get it from, or do they just make it up? So based on stuff they've seen?
I mean, it's been because I know we talked about right when we were becoming members, we talked about this. And I know that the founding pastor or elder basically took chunks of a bunch of different liturgies and put together one. And so there's, I believe, like some liturgies from like some Reformed Anglican traditions, Presbyterian, and that kind of thing. And so like it's basically just pieces from different ones to make up the one that we have.
Gotcha. Yeah, and I've looked at it before. It's familiar for someone who's in the Lutheran denomination. There's a lot of similarity, so that's why I was curious, because I know like every church in America is basically from, well, not every church. Most churches they're like an offshoot of Anglican at some level, other than maybe like Lutherans or the other potentially distinct denominations like Roman Catholic or Orthodox or whatever. Because you've got the Puritans who were nonconformists in the Church of England, as like, some of the first settlers. And then you've got Methodism, which is, a descendant of Anglicanism and all that sort of thing. So it's like we can blame the Anglicans for everything that's going wrong with the church in America.
I'm good at that, man. I'm always open to the idea of like putting the responsibility on somebody else.
Yeah. It's never me or us. It's always them.
It's never us.
It's them. That's awesome. That's really interesting. So, I think I might have gotten off track with my question, but it was something to the effect of like what?
Because you're asking me like, how did I get here, right?
Yeah. How did liturgy? Because it sounds like you could have probably picked any church to go to if you're moving to a new town. How do you settle on that one?
Yeah. So we moved to San Antonio a year ago. About 7 years prior to that, we were planning a church in Alpine, and so we were planning. We were planning a church in Alpine, and as I was studying more and more church history, liturgy kind of kept coming up. And the more and more I was studying like Reformed theology, liturgy continued to come up. And I think you and I were having conversations because we were kind of becoming more and more comfortable with a lot of the culture that we were in, right? And so you and I kind of were in the more or less the Reformed SBC culture, right?
Yeah.
And we were kind of like just not really pleased with a lot of like the way that was going. And then like I was just continuously like feeling more and more like tribeless. Like in the city I was in, our church was just different. The theology we had was different. It was like being on a deserted island. And so my broader tribe, like the Reformed SBC thing, people, I was just not feeling like I was in line with a lot of them. So there was just like a lot of that going on. And so when you and I were talking, like this was probably like going back probably like 2018, maybe. Liturgy was coming up in a lot of our conversations and about why churches were liturgical and why aren't a lot of churches liturgical anymore? Well, even though we said every church has a liturgy, but for the sake of conversation, like why are churches not liturgical anymore? Why is the order of service not what it once was? Why does it seem like there's not very much thought put into it? Why does the church service feel like how can we get people in and out as fast as possible? Why does it seem to cater more to our feelings so much more, like so much? Like should there be more to this? And so I think in learning about liturgy, I think one of the things that was a big factor for me was learning that there actually was thought put into it. Like that awareness that there actually was a lot of thought put into this.
Thousands of years of thought.
Yeah. And so like there's thousands of years of thought and study put into these liturgies. And so I think one of the things one of the ways the church has failed over the past however many decades was we don't teach the young people in the church really anything anymore. The church doesn't really care about discipling. And I know I'm speaking generally, so like that's just what it is.
Actually,
like my church does disciple people who are into young people. Like,
and praise the Lord for that. We're not talking to you.
Yeah, man. And
random person in the comments.
Right. The broader culture, we don't really do that. And so like when you're a young, like me, somebody 18 coming into the faith, like one of the questions I had was like, why is everything so old? Why do we do these things this way? Like, why is everything just so like old and historic? And when I'm asking these questions, nobody has any answers or nobody's taking the time to answer these things. And so like 10 years down the road, I'm learning that like you said, there's thousands of years of study and thought and prayer and fasting going over these liturgies. And the whole point of the liturgies was one of the points of liturgies was to disciple the members of the church. Mm-hmm. And that was probably the big change for me in that was the liturgies were a way that the church discipled its people. And so like, it's not a bad thing that liturgy is repetitive. It's not a bad thing at all. It's actually a very good thing. And like, when you think about every other area and aspect of your life, you have an understanding of that. If you're an athlete, you perfect your craft through repetition. Like if you're a basketball player, you become good at dribbling by doing the drills and the practices like over and over and over and over again. If you're a football player, you're a wide receiver, you become good at route running by running routes over and over and over again. If you're a musician on the piano, like you practice that over and over again in repetition. If you become good at typing by these exercises. And so like, we understand this with everything else in life. But for some reason, somewhere along the lines, our faith is different. And that has to be the exception. And like with that was honestly probably the biggest game changer for me. And so I was slowly trying to figure out like, how can we be more intentional with our liturgy in our church plants before we moved to San Antonio? I don't know if it was going to be a historic one. I might have Frankensteined it because that's how I am. But so like when we stumbled onto a church in San Antonio that was liturgical, not high church, no robes and any of that kind of no robes, chanting, smoke, and that kind of stuff. But it's liturgical. That was pretty awesome.
That's fascinating.
Thanks.
Yeah, it really is. No, it's. I can see how passionate you're getting about that as well, and that's something that I've kind of come to in the last several years as well. Since we were on similar journeys, we ended up in different spots, but like there's a lot of similarities, which I think is hilarious at one way and really pretty cool another. Yeah. So you think for your tradition now, I mean, you're granted it's a small, maybe congregation of one that does it exactly like this, but you've got some type of historic liturgy. Do you think that's the biggest strength then of your like current tradition, or what would you say, broadly speaking? You can be broad or specific. What do you think is the biggest strength? What gets you to go back essentially?
Man, that's like, that is a good question. So like the biggest, like where we're at right now, the liturgy is pretty cool. And I didn't realize how much it was basically affecting me till I went and preached at a friend's church of mine in rural Texas. And so we've been friends for a long time, and he invited me to come preach at his church. And his churches, they're not liturgical, and like that's fine. I mean, there's different churches for a reason. That's okay. I don't have a problem with churches being different. I think we should care more about being more ecumenical than we tend to be. And but like I want to make that clear that their church is the way it is for a reason, and they're doing good work in their town. But I mean, so one of the things that we do at our church right now is when we read. So like when the pastor gets up there to preach, we read that passage together. And at the end of the reading, it's like the pastor says, "It's the word of the Lord," and everybody in the congregation says, "Thanks be to God."
Yeah.
And so it's a very simple thing, man. And so like when I went and preached at his church, we didn't do it like that at all. And like I'm a guess at his church, we're gonna do it their way. I'm not gonna like come in and be like, we're gonna do it my way. But like I'm gonna respect that. And so like I read the passage by myself, and it was weird. And then when I was done reading it, I was kind of like, all right, I guess I'm done. It was so weird, man. And so like I didn't realize like how much it was affecting me.
That's funny.
And so I mean, I think the liturgy is it's a strength, man. It communicates a value for the scriptures and the word of God. And so like, that's definitely a strength. But kind of to piggyback off of that, I mean, the tradition's value for the scriptures is definitely one of the strengths. And so like you see that through the liturgy, you see that through the preaching and the teaching of the word. And like we're going through like a book of the Bible, which is the way I generally did it when I was church planning. And this is the way that they do it for the most part. And so like that's awesome. And I don't know if I'd say it's a tradition thing, but one of the strengths, at least of the church that we're at, which is a part of the tradition, is the love in the heart for the local body. And there's definitely a care there for the people that I haven't probably experienced in a lot of places. The deacon is actually deacon, which is pretty cool. I've never really seen that.
It's funny when a church says they take scripture seriously, and then they actually do that. It's not just, a sermon, but it's like their lives. Like the deacon's actually deacon. They actually serve. The pastor knows your name.
That's
it's not not to crap on mega churches, but the pastor doesn't know your name.
Yeah.
That's a whole other topic.
Yeah.
But yeah, just when like, and no church is perfect, but when the local body is functioning, at least partially how it should, it's a big deal. So that's awesome. Thanks for sharing. Let's do our lightning round. Don't have to spend a lot of time on these questions. Lightning round. So what is on your reading list right now?
So one of them is J.I. Packer's Knowing God, because our church has small groups and we're going through that together. And I just started reading because like I have my own business and I do website design and all that kind of fun stuff. I've been just started reading Donald Miller's Story Brand, which is really cool. And our church is going through Mark right now, and I'm actually going to be preaching 2 Sundays from now. And so I've been digging in commentaries on Mark.
Awesome.
One of my favorites is the ESV commentary, which you can kind of see behind me.
Okay. So what Bible versions do you use?
ESV, man. It's the only one.
You're an ESV onlyer?
I can't.
CT.
ESVO.
Yeah, ESVO. ESV only. Just that's the only one you read and reference?
That's my main one, man. Like when I'm digging in, like I'll check out NASB. I like the NET Bible, which not a lot of people use.
The NET?
Yeah.
Net Bible?
Yeah, it's pretty solid. So
that's
like
cool.
NASB, NET, might dabble into the New King James or the CBS a little bit, but yeah.
Yeah. I've actually found myself I've actually found myself reading the New King James every so often. Never used to. And I've got a CSB study Bible, which was actually it's the HCSB before they updated it to be the CSB. I guess they tried to make it a broader appeal or something like that.
Probably.
But who knows the mind of Lifeway, the SBC publishers. Okay. Final. What do you do for fun?
So, what I do for fun, I've over the years I've been enjoying smoking more meats, throwing briskets on the grill, throwing Boston butt on there, some racks of ribs. Love doing that. Mainly because like I love having people at the house, and so that's a great way to feed a lot of people. And I actually enjoy how long it takes to smoke meat. Spending anywhere from 8 to 16 hours on something is pretty awesome. And then I get to have a cigar or two while that's going and drink a good beer or a little bit of bourbon. That's what it's about.
Go-to cigar.
Go-to cigar. Oh, man. Does that have to be one?
Top 3.
Yeah, so like Southern Draws Jacob Ladder is probably one of my favorites, which I know is kind of like probably typical for me to say. I like a lot of CAO stuff. MX2 was great. The Brasilia is phenomenal. Man, there's been smoking more stuff from Crux. They got some pretty good stuff. Island Gin, man. I love the Island Gin.
It's underrated for sure.
Yeah, man. I don't see that very many places, so when I see it, I always snag it.
That's awesome. That's 4 actually. So maybe even 5 or 6.
It's passion, man. It's passion.
There's too many, man. There's too many. So what's next for you?
That is a phenomenal question, man. I don't know, but my wife and I have been talking about it a lot for the past couple of weeks, man. So it's something that I hope we'll get clarity soon. But we've been talking about it a lot lately, and so it's kind of, I don't know. We want to buy a house here pretty soon, so we're trying to figure out exactly where that location is going to be. We'd like to buy a house again. That'd be awesome. And our business is going really well, so that's kind of giving us more and more freedom. We love the church that we're at, and so that kind of is something we're taking into a lot of consideration. We have great relationships there. I wish all of this was in a different part of the country, because I do not like the climate that I'm in, man.
San Antonio.
I don't like 50 weeks of summer, man. I don't like breaking out a sweat walking from my front door to my truck, dude. That's just not cool.
And you enjoy cigars and smoking meat, which are both outdoor activities.
Yes, man. And so, like, I'm conflicted.
Yeah. Well, I know one thing that's next is a podcast.
Yes, man. Yes, I'm excited about this, man. I'm really excited about this. I hope that other people enjoy it as much as we are enjoying it right now.
Yeah.
And
I've enjoyed interviewing people and just having, hopefully good conversations. Something I look forward to, honestly. So
like, I love the stories of regular people. I mean, like, it's cool to hear the stories about the exception, right? Like, those stories are cool, man. But I mean, sometimes I think those tend to put unintentionally put unnecessary expectations like on regular people. And so, like, it's cool to hear the stories of other people, hear like how we shared struggles, shared stories, shared types of victories, other people who have similar different lifestyles are doing the same thing. And that's good stuff.
Yeah, for sure. Man, I appreciate you joining. Thanks for taking the time and sharing a bit of your story. It's awesome.
That's good, man. That's good. Thanks for
appreciate it.
Yeah.
Well, and thanks everyone for joining us. If you enjoyed this conversation, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel. If you click the bell, it'll notify you when we have a new episode that goes live. And, maybe you could tell Jon, leave a comment below and tell him that he's smoking his meat wrong.
I'm not going to smoke.
So until the next time, the Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you his peace. Amen. We'll see you guys later.